After today's Xbox Developer Direct, we now have a thorough understanding of Xbox's content plans going throughout 2024. And in other news, there's also been a lot more layoffs. Let's start with the more positive news first. Kicking it off with the Xbox Developer Direct, they showed off 5 different games and also highlighted the developers that worked on these games all the while. I really like the evolution of this showcase. It's gotten really impressive, and I think it's taken on its own identity from that Nintendo Direct format, which kind of set the bar for a lot of publishers and developers who like to do a similar type of show. This Xbox one just feels on a whole other level in terms of we're getting, sweeping camera moves through these different studios. And in the case of the Square Enix game, Visions of Mana, we're getting like a mini history lesson. But before I get carried away, let's just talk about the actual games. First up was Avowed. This game is something we haven't seen a ton of gameplay for yet. That's changed now after today. We've gotten a look at the environments and some character dialogue, which I thought didn't quite fit in the environment it's in. It's still early. A lot of things could change, especially with audio. But yeah, we got some branching tree dialogue with some implications there. And the combat, I think, is what really looks interesting about Avowed. This is a Skyrim type game where you're using magic and you're using melee weapons. One thing I should note though is, from what I've heard, this game is not as open as Skyrim was or is. Avowed is going to be, sounds like a lot more of a more focused game, probably a lot less openness to explore, and there's probably more of a guided path, it sounds like, for Avowed. And that's coming out in fall of 2024. The next thing they showed off was Senua's Saga Hellblade II, which is just continues to be a completely stunning game visually, and the audio effects. They went into detail in the developer direct about how they're doing the binaural audio. There's like a clip in there of 2 singers kind of circling around what I'm assuming was a microphone shaped like headphones. So like you're getting a lot of positional audio throughout this game for this experience, and playing as someone who has a psychosis is kind of an interesting phenomenon. But they said they're adding similar effects and positioning for audio for all different types of sounds in the game, so that's certainly going to be one you're going to want to play with headphones. Hellblade 2 is definitely a game I've been looking forward to. That's coming out May 21st in 2024. They also said they redid the combat since the first game, so if you didn't like the combat in the first one, they're going to take another stab at it here. It looks really, really impressive. So yeah, May 21st, 2024 for that one. And then, man, a game that I personally am really excited about. When I saw it at the Game Awards, I was there in person, I almost got out of my seat. Square Enix is publishing Visions of Mana. We got Masaru Oyamada, the producer for the Mana series, up there talking about the game, as well as a series creator, Koichi Ishii. And we don't get to see these guys very often. Like Japanese game developers are usually so shrouded in a lot of mystery, not really being frontmen, not really being put in front of a camera to talk about their work. Legendary people, as many legendary people as Nintendo has had, and as many of those legends have been front-facing parts of Nintendo, we don't get a lot of that from these other publishers like Square Enix. So very cool to see some representation there. But I am also very excited about this game. I'm a big Secret of Mana fan. I was like my first RPG, so to see it get this kind of transformation with like this 3D action combat that like delves into these kind of wild cutscenes in the middle of combat, very, very exciting. I'm really excited to see what they do with the formula of the Mana series with this new game. There's a mount that looks really cool. It's called, what is it called? A Pikul, which is like a dog armadillo type of thing. And I'm just really excited. That game's coming out summer 2024. I can't imagine that it's going to stay Xbox exclusive for long. Right now, what's being talked about is a release on Xbox and PC in the summer of 2024, but I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't come to PlayStation later on. Then for what probably for many was the more boring part of the show was the section on Ara History Untold. This is from Oxide. The studio split off, it sounds like, or it has ex-members from Firaxis who worked on Civ 5, and they're really just trying to take the edges off of 4X strategy, off of a historical sim game, and it seems like they're trying to do a lot to make it more accessible to a wider audience. It's like simultaneous turns, and they're changing the win conditions, so it's by a stat called Prestige, which you can get in a number of different ways. I'm not the biggest strategy sim fan, but it does look neat. I find it pretty interesting. At the very least, it looks really pretty, and it seems like there's just a ton of systems in that game and a lot of variety in terms of the different cultures and stuff. They have leaders. They've got, a lot of the things you'd expect to be kind of in a very serious sim game or in a very serious civ or civilization game. And it looks like they're just really trying to punch things up in a way that makes things accessible, but it's also exciting for players who like those really deep strategy mechanics. That one's out fall 2024. Last up, Xbox showed off Indiana Jones. This is a Machine Games joint, makers of Wolfenstein or those kind of Wolfenstein reboots, which are really, really good. I think my first take at this was like, it looks, on its face as an Indiana Jones game, it looks incredible. But if I compare it to other action adventure games like Uncharted or even some of those Tomb Raider games, the set pieces and the action, the movement in those games is a lot more bombastic. And I think there's probably a good reason for that, in which you're trying to make an Indiana Jones game where he's going to move like Indy, and those action sequences need to feel like an Indiana Jones game, and those puzzles are going to be a little bit more involved, it looks like, compared to something you might find in an Uncharted, which is interesting. And also, it's first person. It's a mix of first and third person, which I think is neat. I really liked it when they did that in the Deus Ex games, the Deus Ex kind of reimagining. I like those games, and I think that the use of third person in stealth was really cool, and then first person when you're kind of running around the world. In this case, for Indiana Jones, it's going to be first person when you're in combat and when you're kind of exploring, but if you need to climb up, you climb your whip or climb up a pole or something, or like a pipe, then it's going to go switch into that third person mode, which I think is a really cool way to do it. I'm interested to see how it works. Machine Games makes really good first person games, so you'd want them to stay at least a little bit in their wheelhouse. They showed off whip mechanics where you can use the whip as actually a distraction, which is kind of silly, or you can like whip a guy's leg to knock him over. The whip seems like it has all sorts of different use cases. You can use it for traversal and that sort of thing. So they're really thinking about it, and I think it looks neat. As an Indiana Jones fan, I really want to play this, but I could see how other people might have seen what was shown off at the Xbox developer showcase or direct and been like, well, maybe I'll pass it. This one doesn't look that good to me or something. Like there was one facial animation where Indy was talking and was like, yeah, that one probably needs another pass. It looked a little stiff, but I'm excited as an Indiana Jones fan, and we'll see how it goes. That game didn't get a release window, just a blanket 2024, which I think gives them space to push into 2025 if things go badly. I bet we see this game in the summer or in the holiday time if it does in fact come out in 2024. So yeah, an exciting list of games. It's not like a huge blockbuster lineup of games, but as like a presentation, I was really kind of blown away by the production values put into this, and like allowing developers to kind of talk excitedly about their games. And I know they're reading from a script on a lot of these cases, but it's still cool to see, faces and names of people who actually are working on these games in such a cool way, right? With just like tons of production value, because the lighting looks great, the footage and the cameras they shot on, just phenomenal, right? All of that stuff looks super, super cool and is presented super, super well. In terms of Xbox's year, let's hope that Hellblade 2 really hits. These other games, I'm not sure if they're gonna hit super, super hard. I think there's gonna be like big fans of each of them in different ways. Like for me, for Visions of Mana, obviously. For some, that game's gonna be Avowed. It will be their most anticipated game. So there's like a cool spread here. So I'm definitely interested to see how this kind of plays out economically, I guess, for Xbox, and in terms of, audience perception wise, if it still feels like Xbox is still sitting on a ton of these studios and not making many games, right? And I think more games are coming, and we're probably going to get a couple more announcements throughout the year, but here it is. They kind of laid it out. Next up, let's talk about that other thing I mentioned at the beginning of the video. That's right. Layoffs. This story comes from gamesindustry.biz. It was written by James Batchelor. CI Games lays off 10% of its staff. The article reads, CI Games has laid off 10% of its workforce across the entire company. Staff posting on LinkedIn claimed the majority of the marketing team has been made redundant. Gamesindustry.biz was told that Lords of the Fallen developer, Hexworlds, and Sniper Ghost Warrior Studio Underdog had also been affected. When asked for confirmation, CI Games responded with the following statement from CEO Marek Tyminski. To preserve business strength and stability, CI Games has made the tough but necessary decision to implement a target round of redundancies, affecting approximately 10% of employees across the company. We would like to thank each of them for the part they played during their time with us. Further business optimizations are being made to the organization's pipelines and processes. So yeah, that one really sucks, but that's not all. The Dead by Daylight developers have also been hit with layoffs. This comes by way of Kotaku in this article put together by Zach Zweisen, who's keeping track of all of the layoffs happening in the games industry throughout 2024. If we scroll down here to the more recent layoffs, we'll see right here, Behavior Interactive has lost 45 people. Kotaku has learned that Dead by Daylight developer Behavior Interactive laid off around 45 people between January 9th and 11th. At least one person has publicly posted about the layoffs on LinkedIn, and on January 18th, Behavior Interactive confirmed to Kotaku that layoffs happened, and they sent an official statement that reads, "Recently changing market conditions necessitated adjusting the scope of several behavior projects. In these situations, our preference is always to reassign talent to other projects. Unfortunately, this option is not always available to us. These departures represented less than 3% of our total workforce." Maybe 3% of their total workforce, but that's still 45 people. And it's also kind of wild because we know that COVID has impacted the games industry a lot. There was a boom, right, of revenue that happened, and companies staffed up to signify that they're growing, and they made some big bets on like starting up new projects that seemed a little more risky. And now as we're kind of coming into this late stage of COVID, or this new stage of COVID, we're kind of seeing the hands that got overplayed, right? Some of that is what's happening here, and so now layoffs have to happen to like save costs and make companies seem more sustainable. There's also the kind of expectations of companies to grow infinitely, right? This unprecedented expectation that companies must show growth to appease their board of directors and their shareholders, et cetera, et cetera. So one way that companies do that is just by laying off tons of people, because it's the fastest way to save a ton of money when you're doing your quarterly reports. So that sucks. It's getting ridiculous at this point. I don't think we're done seeing layoffs. So hang in there, and you'll probably see me collect more stories about layoffs in the near future, I'm assuming. I hope not, but I think that's what it is this year. Game developer Ferran Noor has also been collecting data on all of the layoffs from this year. So as you can see, the list is here. There's some from Rovio, Montreal as well recently. 31st Union, there's not a known number of affected, but I bet you something will get reported on that soon. Here's the CI Games one. They lost about 30 people. Behavior Interactive, 45. Here's Wemo, NetSpeak. And then early on, we heard there was more from Unity. On the 10th this month, there was the big layoff from Twitch, which had 500 people. And Lost Boys Interactive, we heard, got hit pretty hard from Embracer. We're not sure. It seemed like a majority of the staff was let go there, but we don't know the actual number. So yeah, you can go to videogameslayoffs.com to see this. And yeah, just such a bummer. I hope the layoffs slow down soon, and I hope that the companies continue to hire as well, but it's going to be really, really competitive out there. Next up, Rocksteady founders have a new post-Suicide Squad studio. This comes from Polygon. This is written by Michael McWhorter. Rocksteady Studios founders Sefton Hill and Jamie Walker have established a new development studio in London called 100 Star Games, which is described as a AAA game studio startup that will consist of only 100 veterans and emerging talents. According to McWhorter, 100 Star Games has not been officially announced, but it is listed on the corporate data website Endole, with Hill and Walker listed as directors, and according to the company's website, which appears to have gone live in October, it's hiring for open positions. McWhorter goes on to say how a handful of lead developers and director level ex-Rocksteady employees have left the Batman Arkham studio in recent months to join an unannounced studio, according to LinkedIn profiles that Polygon has reviewed. Hill and Walker left Rocksteady Studios in 2022 after more than 18 years at the company and in the midst of the development of Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. It sounded like, I think I saw Ryan McCaffrey tweeting about this, saying that they probably left before Suicide Squad came out so they could find seed money for a new studio to spin something up. I think he kind of just called that one as he saw it. You'd hope that's not the case, but it certainly seems plausible that they'd want to get out while the getting was good so that they could start up their new thing. And then I'm sure Rocksteady, as a team, is probably not super happy losing some of their lead talent as they're trying to ship Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, especially since that game is under so much scrutiny already. One side note about that is I heard that the game is adding a new mode that will allow players to use their friends' characters as their NPCs so they can grind out experience and loot. like while they're not online and stuff. So that's a really interesting take. Like, I don't know why they wouldn't lead with a feature like that and say they were including that in the game. I think some websites were using it as the justification for Suicide Squad, a single player game, needing to be always online. But yeah, that doesn't particularly apply. I feel like you should be able to play a single player game offline if you want to, even if you don't have a feature like that. But that's what it is. You know, it's not hard to imagine that the founders of Rocksteady had some beef with the executive level branch or managers above them, telling them what types of games they needed to make, and then spending so much time on a game like Suicide Squad only to have it be received how it's being received now. So imagine tensions were high, and there's probably a lot of good reasons that they would want to leave Rocksteady to go start a new thing. But yeah, it's all speculation for now. We'll probably hear more about it as they have a project to talk about, and as they start doing interviews talking to the games press. In other news, a big Starfield update is dropped into Steam beta with more than 100 fixes and improvements. This comes from the official Starfield Twitter. You can read the blog post for the full updated notes. So these are the patch notes for Starfield's update 1.9.47. It's all listed kind of by subhead here. Fixes for animation, creatures and enemies, crew and companions, a bunch of general fixes, fixes for graphics, widescreen support for 32:9, 21:9, 16:10, and just tons and tons of stuff with quests and inventory and artifacting and crashes. There's fixes for outposts, powers. Here's the list for quests and random encounters. Just kind of all of those Bethesda bugs you know and love, and they're starting to squash them one at a time, or 100 at a time, I guess. So this is the biggest update they've released for the game so far. I think it's bigger than all of the previous updates combined, I think I saw in one article. So there you go. Moving on, nearly 50% of developers say generative AI tools are being used at their workplace. This story comes from VGC. It was written by Chris Scullion, and the subhead reads, "A large majority say that they're concerned about the ethics of using AI tools." Nearly 50% of developers say that generative AI tools are being used at their workplace, while 84% say they're concerned about their use. The latest GDC State of the Game Industry Survey, which asked more than 3,000 developers across indie and AAA studios about their work and the industry, asked if generative AI tools like ChatGPT, DALL-E, GitHub, Copilot, or Adobe Generative Fill were being used at their company. 31% of the 3,000 of respondents said they personally use such tools, while a further 18% said they didn't, but others in their workplace did. 15% said AI wasn't being used, but that there was an interest in trying it out, while 23% said there was no interest in AI at their workplace. So yeah, this comes on the heels of the AI story that I talked about in the last video, and a lot of AI stories that are popping up, the lawsuit with Midjourney, and yeah, it's definitely a touchy subject right now. It has a lot to do with copyright holders, right? And different unlicensed artworks that should be probably licensed being used to build models for these AI platforms, creative tools, and that sort of thing. And so yeah, it's really big and messy right now. If you check out the GDC survey, there's a little highlight right here. 4 in 5 developers have ethical concerns about generative AI. 56% of developers are worried about future layoffs. Both of these stories were hitting here today. 26% of AAA developers have games being adapted into movies or shows. That's interesting. We're kind of back into that licensed games kind of deal, licensed titles. Plus 26% increase in games with accessibility measures. Younger devs are 157% more likely than older devs to support unionization. Yeah, some fun stats there. I think some people have been comparing the AI craze to NFTs and like cryptocurrency. I think AI has a little bit more staying power, if only because, as you saw in these kind of survey results, there are studios already using different types of AI technologies, and it's saving them time probably. And if the management level game developers or producers and executives are like, hey, this new AI tool is going to save us tons of time and money, and then it actually kind of delivers on that without making the game complete trash or something, and they can get away with it, kind of like we've seen with the finals and maybe like what we're going to see with Foam Stars, then they're going to keep pushing on this. They're going to try to find less intrusive ways to use these type of programs and things to make games, to save money. And if for only that reason, I think AI stuff is going to stick around, maybe not in the best way. So yeah, I think it's important that we have different conversations about AI, that if you don't like it, you should push back on that sort of thing, because we're only going to get more of this, right? These companies are going to try what they can and get away with what they can. Part of the reason NFTs failed besides for being wholly useless, is a lot of people push back every time there was mention of companies getting involved with NFTs and trying to incorporate them into games, right? And something similar is going to happen with AI. And I don't think it's going to go away entirely, but I think we can push towards a more like ethical AI future, right? And I think that's what game developers and the game audience should be striving for. Last up, a little bit of a feel-good story after talking about the Ubisoft executive who had mentioned in order for, franchise services and gaming to succeed, that players would have to become more comfortable not owning their games, which is like just a really tough sell in games, right? Like games are expensive and we pay a lot for them, and digital only games can just disappear, in the blink of an eye, it seems like sometimes, or hundreds and thousands of them can disappear in the blink of an eye once a company like Xbox or Nintendo decides to stop supporting old games or an old server or something like that. That said, Sea of Stars physical release sails in this May. Sea of Stars, of course, a retro-inspired gem from last year, a very good RPG, top-down RPG in the vein of Secret of Mana or of a Chrono Trigger, right? This story comes from Nintendo Life. It's written by Alana Hogue, and it reads, Sabotage's beautiful turn-based RPG Sea of Stars physical release is landing on store shelves on the 10th of May, 2024. The standard retail edition of the game, featuring some stunning art from concept artist Bryce Coe, will come with a double-sided poster from the same artist and a digital download of the soundtrack costing $39.99. You love to hear it. You'll be able to pick this one up from standard retailers and IM8bit May 10th. That's not all though. There's an exclusive edition for $44.99. This is slated to arrive in Q2 of 2024, so sometime after the retail edition, and it includes a retro-inspired game manual, collectible slipcase, a collectible poster featuring original art and oversized game map, a download of the soundtrack, and 16 character stickers. That's only $5 more, and you get so much extra stuff. So, man, I know which one I would choose, but yeah, this looks great. This looks fantastic. If you're a collector of physical games, this might be one to grab for sure. This art looks awesome. So yeah, that's the feel-good story of the day, and that's all the news I have for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video.